Across the vast landscapes of Canada, from the Rockies of British Columbia to the forests of Ontario, stand the fading remnants of a system that tore thousands of children from their families, their culture, and too often, from life itself. These are the stories of Canada's residential schools, and more recently, of the unmarked graves that have brought the truth crashing into the national conscience. This is a story not just of sorrow, but of resilience, of survival, of reckoning. For over a century, from the 1800s to the final closure in 1996, more than 150,000 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were taken from their families by the Canadian government. These children were placed into residential schools run mostly by Christian churches, institutions designed not to educate but to assimilate, to take the Indian out of the child. They were told to forget their names, to stop speaking their languages, to erase the songs, dances, and sacred stories passed down for generations. Their hair was cut, their clothing burned, their identities dismantled, and inside those cold, distant buildings, often far from their homes, they faced hunger, forced labor, abuse, loneliness, and death. In many cases, the children never returned. For decades, survivors spoke of classmates who vanished overnight, children who became ill and were never seen again. They whispered of graves behind schoolyards and bones turned up by accident during construction. But for years, their voices were ignored, their stories dismissed as rumor, as exaggeration. Then, in May 2021, the world was forced to listen. A ground-penetrating radar survey at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia revealed the remains of 215 children buried in unmarked graves. The news sent a wave of grief and fury across the country and around the world. But Kamloops was not alone. In the months that followed, similar discoveries were made across Canada. 751 unmarked graves in Marieville, Saskatchewan, 182 at St. Eugene's Mission School in Cranbrook, BC. Dozens more sites followed, and more continue to be investigated. The numbers are staggering. The pain, immeasurable. These graves were never part of any official record. No memorials marked their resting places. Some children were buried in mass graves. Others were left in forgotten corners of school property. In many cases, their families were never told they had died. How could a nation so proud of its values allow this to happen? To answer that, we must understand what residential schools were designed to do. They were not simply educational institutions. They were tools of cultural erasure. Government policy and church doctrine worked hand in hand to destroy Indigenous identity. Children were punished for speaking their language, denied the right to practice their spirituality, forbidden to express grief, joy, or affection. Discipline was often harsh. Abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual, was rampant. Malnutrition and disease ran unchecked. Overcrowding made tuberculosis and influenza devastatingly lethal. In some schools, mortality rates reached 60%. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, which concluded in 2015 after years of testimony from survivors, called the residential school system what it truly was: cultural genocide. Over 6,000 children are known to have died in these institutions, though the true number is likely far higher. Each number is a child. Each child was a life, a name, a story that was cut short. The children who returned often did so broken. They carried trauma that shaped generations, what researchers call intergenerational trauma. Families were shattered, languages lost, ceremonies forgotten. Communities were left grieving, healing from wounds invisible to the outside world. And yet, the survivors spoke. For decades, they carried their pain in silence. Then, in courtrooms, in community centers, in hearings across the country, they told their stories. Stories of being taken from their homes, of hunger and cruelty, of losing brothers and sisters. They told the world what had happened because the world needed to know. The government of Canada issued a formal apology in 2008. A financial settlement followed, but many survivors say it was never about the money. It was about being heard, being believed, and seeing justice. Even after the apology, access to school records and burial information was limited. Some churches withheld documents, governments moved slowly. And so the discovery of graves in Kamloops was not only a confirmation of survivors' testimonies, it was a breaking of silence long maintained. Communities across Canada began to mourn. Orange shirts, symbolizing the movement born from survivor Phyllis Webstad's story, appeared in schools, parks, and on public buildings. Monuments were painted, memorials held, and the questions deepened. How many more children are buried, unnamed, across the country? Why are records missing? Who is accountable? The work of uncovering the truth continues. Ground-penetrating radar surveys are being conducted at former school sites nationwide. Survivors and Indigenous leaders are guiding the process. Some communities have chosen to share their findings publicly. Others mourn in private, deciding when and how to speak. This is not history, this is now. It is a truth that Canada must continue to face, not once a year, but every day. In classrooms, in government, in churches, in homes. We must listen, not to respond, but to understand. We must grieve, not just the deaths, but the silence. We must act, not for guilt, but for justice. Because behind each grave is a name. Behind each name is a child. Behind each child is a family, still waiting, still hurting, still hoping. And yet, through it all, Indigenous communities across Canada have shown unimaginable resilience. They have kept their languages alive, revived ceremonies once outlawed, taught their children the stories and songs once stolen. They have rebuilt, resisted, and risen. Elders continue to guide younger generations. Artists reclaim traditional designs and messages. Youth are learning to drum, to dance, to speak their ancestral words. The spirit of these communities endures, unbroken. This is not a story of defeat. This is a story of survival. But survival must be honored with truth. Reconciliation must be rooted in justice. That means full access to church and government archives. It means supporting Indigenous-led investigations. It means ensuring survivors receive mental health care, community support, and a platform. It means honoring the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, not as a day off, but a day of remembrance and education. And it means listening when Indigenous voices say, "We are still here, we remember." To the children who never came home, we see you now, we speak your names, we walk with your families, we carry your stories, and we promise never again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.